I'm carefully designing the big simple shapes. I'm carefully designing the big simple masses of light and shadow. I'm emphasizing the clear simple statement of those features and the way that those bold shadows describe those features, so that this is some artwork that has some oomph and some guts. And so we have the final drawing right there to make the comparison to. You can see how I have vignetted the drawing, where I've chosen to put light next to dark, where I've chosen to put dark next to light, where I've hit some little accents to draw a little extra attention to, and where I've lost edges so as to not call attention to, all trying to make a cohesive, interesting, and compelling portrait of this particular model. So let's take a look at the hair, for instance. If we zoom in and take a look at that hairline where the forehead meets the hair, you see that I'm carefully getting the light and shadow in there, and I'm drawing just below that area right now, but I do want to discuss the hair itself. You see that I have definitely toned it so it feels like light more on the left-hand side, but then turning around and getting more and more into shadow right up there above the forehead. And then if you follow that movement a little to the left, and I have those individual patches of hair right where the forehead meets the hair on the left, notice that each of those little 3 patches of hair, they're in alignment. They're not one is up here and one is down there and the other one's over there. They carefully are all an extension of one simple wraparound form, something that's often missed. We so often notice individual details and draw them independent of the overall form that they represent. And so I'm shooting for that simple statement. I'm shooting for that very simple extension of form. And while we're at it, let's take a close look at these strokes, because I am very carefully designing these strokes so as to create that 3-dimensional statement that we're talking about. So I want you to be able to take a close look at those. I want you to see the thick and the thin of those strokes, the calligraphy up there, creating the silhouette of the head, and I want you to see how they overlap, how they start on one side, wrap around behind, and then another line comes from in front and wraps around behind, and another stroke starts and wraps around the form again. Each of those simple forms giving me an outlined silhouette that is more than that. Sometimes a line can hurt form because it's a symbolic gesture. It's not a shape, it's a line. But if you design that line, you can use that line to enhance form. And that's what I'm targeting here as I do my vignette, something that does not rely just on value, but also relies to a lesser degree on the design of line work. And by the way, let's address that long squiggly line that I put on the far left, right up against the edge of the paper. Why did I do that? Well, it just felt right. It just felt like fun to pull my pencil up and pull it all the way down and then connect it down to his shoulder and put a few squiggles in there. Well, why did it feel right? As I say, intuition is a good thing, but it has to come from something. There has to be a reason behind it. It's okay if it's intuition and in the moment you don't know why, it just feels right, but it has to come from something. So in this case, there's a specific reason why it felt right to put that in there. And this is something that we'll discuss in detail when we get to portrait composition, but I'll give you a little sneak peek, maybe whet your appetite a little bit for some compositional ideas. This portrait has most of its visual interest more on the right-hand side of the page, with the face facing that direction and all the darks of the shadows that direction. And so because there's so much open negative space over on the left-hand side, It gives the portrait a better sense of balance if there's some kind of an anchor over there, some kind of visual activity to act as an anchor and a balance against all of the visual weight that's on the right-hand side. So I really did do that because it felt right in the moment without thinking about visual balance. But having done several hundred portraits in charcoal in my day and trying to figure out how to make them feel right, that's something that I've worked with and practiced, an idea that I've kind of come to and internalized so that then it comes back out when it's appropriate. So back to my idea of intuition comes from hard-won experience. So if you wondered about that squiggly line, that's exactly why. And I'm using my tissue now here because, once again, I'm designing. I want this image to be about the rendering of the forms in the light, and specifically the rendering of the features, because that's what's important to us as the audience. We're interested in that eye and that nose and the mouth and the way the beard wraps around the mustache and the beard wraps around the face and the way that the hair wraps around the head. And so I'm designing where I'm putting the contrast, in part based on what really existed with the model, but additionally by design, by me choosing what I want to emphasize and what I want to edit out of the subject.